The stranger in the dust, the wind carried the scent of dust and sagebrush as Caleb Hardin reined in his tired horse on the ridge above the valley. It had been 8 long years since he last saw the broken fences and buckling timbers of his father's ranch. 8 years since the war had dragged him away and left the land to rot in his absence. The house below looked like a husk of what it once was, windows blackened with dust, the barn collapsed on one side, the corral empty and silent. There was a loneliness to it that pressed on his chest, and yet, despite all reason, he felt something stirring. Home, ruined, abandoned, and aching, but still home. He nudged the horse down the trail, each step kicking loose stones that rattled like bones. The late afternoon sun threw long shadows over the plains, and the cicadas were loud, almost mocking. Caleb remembered the boy he had been here, working alongside his father in the blistering summers, his hands cracked and bloody from barbed wire. But that boy was gone. War had carved him into a man with hollow eyes, a man who no longer trusted the silence between heartbeats. When he reached the yard, the boards of the porch groaned under his boots. He ran a hand over one of the posts, the wood soft with rot. And then something shifted. Faint. A sound. The flicker of movement from inside the ranch house. His hand went to the revolver at his hip before his mind even caught up. He wasn't supposed to find anyone here. This was abandoned land. It belonged to ghosts, not the living. He pushed the door open with the edge of his boot, gun drawn. The air inside was stale, but not empty. No. There was a fire in the hearth, faint smoke curling toward a cracked chimney. And in the corner, half hidden in the shadows, stood a figure, slender, unmoving. Her hands clutched a worn Bible to her chest as if the leather and pages could shield her from the steel in his grip. She couldn't have been more than 19, her hair tangled but shining, her dress patched and faded but clean. Her eyes were the thing that struck him most, wide, unflinching, the color of a river in winter. "Who the hell are you?" His voice came out rough, hoarse from travel, harsher than he intended. She flinched but did not run. I live here," she whispered. "This is my home." The words hit him like a hammer. His home. This was his father's house. His family's land. Anger surged in his gut, a tide that fought against the shock. "No," he said, stepping closer, lowering the gun but not holstering it. "This is my home. Hardin land. Been in my family for 2 generations. Who put you here?" Her lips trembled, but her gaze never faltered. "The Lord brought me," she said softly, like a prayer. "And I've been waiting." The silence between them was long, heavy. The crackle of the fire filled it, and the weight of something unspoken settled in the air. Waiting. For him? Caleb's heart, already scarred and stubborn, twisted with unease. Out here on the frontier, nothing came without reason, and nothing was ever what it seemed. Deepening the conflict, the first hour passed with neither of them trusting the other. He set his pack down, demanding answers, and she offered little but fragments. Her name was Abigail, and she had come west, on a wagon train. The rest of the settlers had scattered after a raid, and somehow she had found her way here, alone, untouched, determined. She spoke of visions, of prayers answered, of finding this place because it was where she was meant to be, but she would not explain what exactly she was waiting for. Caleb, hardened by years of blood and betrayal, wanted to believe none of it, yet he could not drive her out. Something in her voice, fragile but unbroken, reminded him of a life. Before the war, a life before loneliness had become his only companion. Still, anger burned in him. The ranch had been abandoned, yes, but it was still his, and now this stranger, this virgin woman with unearthly calm, stood within its walls as though she had a claim he could not deny. The first twist that night, as the plains wind howled outside and rattled the shutters, Caleb lay awake on the floorboards, his revolver within reach. Abigail knelt by the hearth, her head bowed, whispering prayers he could barely hear. There was something unsettling about her devotion, as though she knew more than she let on. He had almost drifted to sleep when a sound tore through the silence. Horses. More than one. Their hooves drummed across the valley floor, closing in on the ranch. Caleb was on his feet in an instant, pistol drawn, eyes narrowing. Abigail did not move. She simply whispered, almost serene, "They've come sooner than I thought." The riders at midnight, the night had a cruel way of amplifying every sound on the plains. Wind groaned against the dry timbers of the ranch house, and the cry of a coyote carried like a warning across the darkened valley. Caleb stood in the center of the room, revolver steady in his hand, while Abigail remained kneeling by the hearth, her hands folded, lips moving silently in prayer. The rhythmic pounding of hooves grew louder, closer, until the ground itself seemed to tremble. Caleb's pulse quickened, but his mind was steady, honed by years of war. No one rode in groups this late unless they were hunting. The question was, hunting what? He glanced toward the girl. "Get away from the window," he muttered. She did not move. Her pale face caught the glow of the dying fire, her eyes lowered, but eerily calm, as though she had known these riders were coming all along. "Did you hear me?" His voice was sharper now, cutting through the walls like a blade. Still, she knelt, unmoving, until finally she lifted her eyes and whispered, "They are not here for me. They are here for you." The words stole the air from his lungs for a heartbeat. Him? He had not set foot in this valley in nearly a decade. Who would remember a Hardin now? Unless, of course, old debts had outlived him. The knock at the door, the hoofbeats slowed, circling the house, their shadows stretching across the broken shutters. Caleb counted at least 4 riders, perhaps more waiting beyond the tree line. One of them dismounted, boots crunching against the gravel. Then came the sound, a fist pounding against the door, 3 deliberate strikes that rattled the boards in their frame. "Hardin!" a voice bellowed, deep and coarse, carrying the grit of whiskey and violence. "We know you're in there." Caleb stiffened. The name cut sharper than any bullet. These men hadn't come by chance. They knew exactly who they were after. He turned to Abigail, but the girl only bowed her head again, whispering words he could not catch. Rage surged through him. What game was this? Who was she truly? "Open the door, Hardin," the voice outside growled. "We ain't here to parley. You owe blood, and we've come to take it." The siege began. Caleb moved swiftly, dragging the heavy oak table toward the door and shoving it against the frame. The hinges groaned as fists hammered again, harder, demanding entry. He motioned toward Abigail, hissing under his breath, "If you want to live, you'll do as I say. Crawl behind that hearth and stay low." At last, she obeyed, though her gaze lingered on him with something like sorrow, as if she already knew the outcome of the night. Shadows loomed outside. A lantern flared against the shutter, illuminating the hard lines of bearded faces. One man spat into the dirt before calling out again. "You took something that wasn't yours, soldier boy. Tonight we collect." Caleb's jaw tightened. Their words were nonsense. Or worse, riddles from some ancient grudge he couldn't recall. Yet their certainty chilled him. War had left too many graves in his wake. Perhaps some ghost had sprouted, flesh again to settle its account. The first shot shattered the silence. A rifle slug tore through the wooden shutters, splintering the wall inches above his head. Caleb dropped flat, returning fire in one swift motion. His bullet cracked the lantern outside, plunging the yard into darkness. Curses rang out, followed by the sound of hooves as the riders scattered to take cover. The siege of the Hardin ranch had begun. Abigail's secret revealed as the gun smoke drifted. Caleb pressed his back against the wall, reloading with steady hands. His mind raced. Why here? Why now? And why had Abigail said they were coming for him? He crawled toward her hiding place, near the hearth. "You knew," he hissed. "You knew they'd be here." Her face was pale, lips trembling as she finally spoke. "They've been following me since the wagon train, but it is not me they want. It is the one who shelters me, the one who returns." Her eyes locked on his, unblinking, And her next words made his blood run cold. "The Lord told me your name before I ever saw your face. He told me a hardin would come back, and that he would bleed for me." Caleb recoiled as though struck. Prophecy. Visions. Madness, more like. Yet her tone was unwavering, her faith absolute. He wanted to call her a liar, a zealot, but there was no time. Outside, the riders regrouped, their voices carrying across the night. "Set the barn alight, smoke him out," Caleb's heart thundered. His father's barn, gone to ruin though it was, still held the memory of his family, his boyhood, and worse, if fire spread to the ranch house, they'd both be ash before dawn. The first kill, the acrid scent of smoke began to seep through the cracks, and Caleb knew hesitation would mean death. He shoved open the back door, slipping into the darkness with revolver drawn. The riders had grown cocky, splitting their ranks to torch the barn. He stalked the first one like a wolf, catching him at the edge of the corral. The man's match was just touching the dry timbers when Caleb pressed cold steel to his skull. "Drop it." The outlaw froze, but only for a moment. He snarled, twisting, reaching for his sidearm. Too slow. Caleb pulled the trigger. The gunshot cracked like thunder echoing across the valley. The man crumpled, lifeless in the dirt. From the house, Abigail's scream pierced the night. Not of fear, but of something deeper. Grief. Or maybe recognition. Caleb's gut twisted. She had known this man. Perhaps all of them. And for the first time in years, Caleb wondered if he had walked into a destiny not of his choosing. The cliffhangers. Shouts erupted from the darkness, rifles cocking, boots pounding toward him. Caleb spun, firing again, the muzzle flash lighting his scarred face. One man dropped, another fell back, wounded. But then, a voice cut through the chaos, calm, commanding, different from the drunken growls of the others. "Enough," it called. The riders fell silent. Even the horses stilled. Out of the shadows rode a figure cloaked in black, tall in the saddle, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat. "Hardin," the figure said, his voice like gravel dragged across stone. "We've been waiting a long time for you." Caleb stood in the firelight of the burning barn, revolver shaking in his grip, while behind him, Abigail whispered through her tears, "That's him, the man I prayed you'd face." The man in the black hat. The flames licked the sky, orange tongues devouring the timbers of the barn, sparks whirling upward into the ink-black night. Smoke coiled through the valley, stinging Caleb's eyes and casting shadows that moved like restless spirits. In the midst of that chaos, the rider in the black hat approached at a slow, deliberate pace, his horse snorting, hooves crunching, over dirt and ash. The other outlaws hung back now, silent and watchful, as if the man's very presence had muzzled them. Caleb leveled his revolver, though the barrel trembled. This was no drunken raider, no half-baked gunslinger looking for plunder. There was weight to the figure, authority, menace, something older than the moment itself. The air grew colder around him, though the fire burned hotter by the second. "Who are you?" Caleb demanded, voice raw, cutting through the hiss of burning wood. The man in black drew his horse to a halt, lifted his head just enough for the firelight to catch the lower half of his face. Hard jaw, scar carved across his cheek like lightning frozen in flesh. His voice rolled out steady, almost too calm. "Name's Silas Kane. You knew my brother Hardin, knew him well enough to put him in the ground." The words struck like a hammer against Caleb's ribs. Silas Kane. The name dragged up memories he had tried to bury. War-torn nights, a skirmish along the border, gunfire in the mud. There had been a Kane then, a sharp-eyed brawler who had sworn vengeance when his brother fell. Caleb had not thought of it in years, yet here he was, vengeance on horseback, cloaked in black. Abigail's whisper drifted from behind him, trembling, almost reverent. "He's the one. The shadow I saw in my dreams." The duel of words, Caleb's grip on the revolver tightened, but a part of him faltered. This was no nameless outlaw he could cut down without question. This was the echo of his past, a debt the war had left unpaid. Silas swung down from his horse with a grace that belied his size, boots crunching over embers as he stepped closer. You thought the war ended when you rode home, didn't you? Silas's eyes glinted like steel. But men like me don't. Forget. You took my blood, and now I've come to balance the scales. You and anyone fool enough to stand at your side. His gaze flicked to Abigail, then narrowing. A preacher's child, is she? Soft-faced, righteous, not the kind of company I expected you to keep. Caleb felt Abigail shrink back behind him, clutching her Bible as though it might turn bullets into feathers. His rage swelled at Silas's mocking tone, yet he fought to keep his voice steady. She has nothing to do with this. It's between you and me. Silas chuckled low, dark. Everything's between you and me, Hardin. The girl, the land, even the air you breathe. You stole years I'll never get back, and I aim to steal yours before the cock crows. The test of loyalty. The other riders stirred at their leader's words, restless wolves awaiting the signal to strike. But Silas raised a hand, halting them. His eyes stayed fixed on Caleb, sharp and unblinking. I'll give you a choice, Silas said, drawing a long, gleaming knife from his belt. The firelight danced on its blade, cruel and cold. Hand over the girl and I'll let you die quick. Keep her, and I'll make you watch what happens before I take your breath. The air thickened, heavy with smoke and silence. Abigail gasped, her knuckles white around her Bible. Caleb did not turn to look at her for fear his resolve might crack. He knew what Silas was doing, testing him, pressing on the softest wound. If he surrendered the girl, he would live for a few more breaths, perhaps even until sunrise. But every inch of his soul rejected the thought. He spat into the dirt, voice a low growl. You'll get her over my corpse. Silas's grin widened, slow and dangerous. That's the idea. Abigail's strange defiance before Caleb could act. Abigail did the unthinkable. She stepped out from behind him, her small frame illuminated by the fire's glow, her voice steady though her body trembled. You will not touch him, she said, each word crisp as iron. For God has set his mark upon this man. He is chosen, whether you know it or not. The riders laughed, their jeers rolling like thunder, but Silas's face darkened. His grin faltered, and for a flicker of a second, his hand twitched. He stared at Abigail as if she were not flesh and blood, but some vision that unsettled him to his marrow. Chosen? He spat. The only thing this man's chosen for is a shallow grave. But Caleb saw something else in Silas's eyes. Hesitation. Fear even, though fleeting. Abigail's words had pierced some unseen armor. The gunfire erupts. The standoff could not hold forever. One of the riders, drunk on fear or bravado, raised his rifle and fired. The shot screamed past Abigail's shoulder, striking the house with a spray of splinters. Caleb lunged forward, shoving her back toward the doorway, his revolver barking fire into the night. Another outlaw fell, clutching his chest, rolling into the dirt. Chaos broke loose. Gunfire cracked like lightning across the valley. Horses reared, men shouted. Silas moved through it all like a shadow, his knife gleaming, his voice commanding his men to press harder. Caleb fought with the fury of a man defending not just his life, but something deeper, something Abigail's presence had awakened in him. As the smoke thickened and the barn collapsed in a roar of sparks, Caleb grabbed Abigail by the wrist and pulled her toward the dark tree line. Run, he shouted. The flight into the wild. They stumbled through the underbrush, bullets tearing past them, voices cursing in pursuit. Caleb's lungs burned. His legs pounded the earth, but he did not let go of her hand. The tree swallowed them, branches whipping against his face. The cries of the riders fading but never gone. When at last they collapsed beside a creek, gasping for breath, Abigail turned to him with wide eyes, her face streaked with smoke and tears. You don't understand, she whispered. Silas Kane isn't just after revenge. He believes you carry something, a secret you don't yet know, and he'll burn this whole land to drag it out of you. Caleb's heart hammered, his mind spinning with anger and disbelief. But deep down, in the hollow the war had left behind, a seed of dread took root. Because part of him knew she was telling the truth. The cliffhanger, The water of the creek shimmered in the moonlight, quiet and deceptively peaceful. But Caleb knew peace had fled this land long ago. And then, the sound again. Hooves in the distance. Not fading. Not retreating. Coming closer. Abigail clutched his arm, her whisper sharp as a knife. "He'll never stop, Caleb. Not until you remember what you've forgotten." And as the hoofbeats closed in, Caleb realized this was no simple feud. This was the beginning of a reckoning, written long before he ever set foot back on the Hardin ranch. Hunted through the wilderness, the forest closed around them like a cage. Tall pines clawed at the sky, their branches tangling into shadows that swallowed the moonlight. Caleb pulled Abigail through the underbrush, every muscle burning, his ears, straining for the rhythm of pursuit behind them. The hoofbeats came and went in echoes as though the night itself carried Silas Kane's men through the trees. They stumbled over roots and rocks, the creek winding beside them like a silver serpent. Caleb's chest heaved with each breath, the air sharp with pine and smoke still clinging from the fire. He had known the land once, every ridge, every dry gulch. But time had turned the map in his memory to dust. Now he moved blind, driven, by instinct, chased by a past that refused to die. Abigail stumbled, falling to her knees. Caleb crouched, gripping her arms to haul her back up, but the look in her eyes stopped him. Not terror, not despair, something stranger, as though she were listening to a voice only she could hear. "We can't keep running," she whispered. "He'll always find us. It isn't the land he hunts, it's you." Caleb's jaw clenched. "Then he'll get his chance when I put a bullet between his eyes." She shook her head, hair wild around her face. "You don't understand. You and Silas are bound by blood, by history. I saw it before I ever met you. One cannot rest while the other breathes." Her words rattled him more than the chase. Bound? He had buried too many bodies to keep track of their ties. Yet her voice held conviction that gnawed at the edges of his disbelief. The night's cold trial. They pressed deeper into the forest until exhaustion forced them to halt in a hollow shielded by stone outcroppings. Caleb set Abigail down and crouched to build a fire. Sparks leapt, caught, and spread into fragile flame. Warmth flickered at last, but it could not soften the weight pressing down on them. Abigail sat close, clutching her Bible, her lips moving, in silent prayer. Caleb watched her from the corner of his eye, studying the way her shoulders trembled, yet her eyes did not waver. She was terrified, yes, but there was a strength in her he had not expected. "Why you?" he muttered finally. "Why come to my ranch? Why wait for me, of all men?" She looked up then, her face luminous in the firelight, every shadow deepening her intensity. "Because I was shown. In dreams, in visions, call it madness if you will. I saw a man scarred by war carrying a burden even he did not know. I saw his name written in fire, Hardin, and I was told to wait for him, to protect him, or to die beside him." Caleb exhaled long and bitter. "Dreams don't mean a damn thing out here. Steel and lead do. Visions won't stop Silas Kane." But she only held his gaze. "Then why did you come back? Why now, after all these years, you think it was chance? I tell you it was fate." The fire crackled between them, and Caleb felt the weight of her words seep into him like water into dry earth. He wanted to deny her, to call it foolishness, but the memory of Silas's face, calm as the scar, the venom in his voice, told him this was no random feud. Silas tightens the noose. The respite did not last. Near dawn, a crow's cry shattered the stillness, followed by the distant bay of hounds. Caleb's stomach turned to stone. Silas's men had loosed their dogs. The hunt would end in blood. He kicked dirt over the fire and pulled Abigail to her feet. "We move now. Stay close." Through brambles and shadow they fled, the forest floor slick with dew, the cries of hounds echoing closer with every heartbeat. The air grew thick, damp, until suddenly the trees broke, spilling them into a barren ravine carved by spring floods. Jagged rocks jutted from the earth, and the sound of rushing water filled the canyon below. Caleb scanned the ridges, too steep to climb quickly, too exposed to cross. They were trapped in a funnel, and the dogs were closing fast. Abigail's breath came sharp, ragged. She clutched his sleeve, pointing upstream. There. A cave. He followed her gaze and saw it. A dark slit in the rock, half hidden by vines. No time to question how she knew it was there. He dragged her toward it just as the first hound broke into sight, teeth bared, eyes gleaming. Caleb raised his revolver and fired. The crack echoed off the canyon walls, the hound tumbling lifeless into the dirt. More followed, howling. The riders, voices carried from beyond the trees, urging the beasts on. He shoved Abigail into the cave's mouth, ducking low as he fired again, each shot pushing the enemy back for one breath more. Then he dove inside, the darkness swallowing them both. The cave of whispers. The air inside was cold, damp, thick with the scent of stone and earth. The walls seemed to close in, every drop of water echoing like a drumbeat. Caleb pressed Abigail deeper into the shadows, his revolver ready, ears straining for pursuit. The hounds clawed at the entrance, snarling, but the narrow gap kept them from breaking through. For a moment, safety, but only for a moment. Abigail's hand trembled as it touched the wall, her fingers tracing shapes invisible to him. This place. I saw this place before. I dreamed of it. This cave was where the truth would be revealed. Caleb frowned, sweat trickling down his brow despite the chill. Truth? All I see is a hole in the rock keeping us from getting torn apart. She turned to him then, eyes glinting in the gloom. You don't remember, do you? What your father told you? What you carried away when you left this land? Silas isn't just chasing revenge. He believes you hold something that can change the fate of men. The words felt heavier than the stone around them. Caleb wanted to laugh, to curse, to shove the weight back onto her shoulders. But deep down, the emptiness in his chest stirred. Some half-memory clawed at the edges of his mind. A secret whispered long ago and buried under years of war and blood. Before he could speak, the voice of Silas Kane carried into the cave, low and certain. You can't hide from me, Hardin. Not in that hole, not anywhere. I'll smoke you out like a rattler, and when you crawl into the light, I'll take what's mine. Abigail gripped Caleb's hand, her voice fierce despite her fear. He cannot take what was given to you. But you must remember, Caleb, before it's too late. The cliffhanger outside, the hounds bayed louder, claws scraping the stone. Riders shouted, wood cracked. They were piling brush at the entrance, preparing to burn them out. Inside, Caleb stared into the darkness, heart pounding, Abigail's words echoing in his skull. A secret, a burden, something his father had left him, forgotten, hidden in the marrow of his memory. The smoke began to curl inward, thin and choking. Silas's voice rose again, triumphant. You've got one chance, Hardin. Step out now and maybe I'll leave the girl breathing. Stay in that cave and you'll both be nothing but ash. The flames roared outside. Abigail's grip on his hand tightened, her whisper urgent in his ear. The choice you make now will bind your soul forever. And Caleb realized the reckoning had come. Ashes of memory. The first wisps of smoke curled into the cave like grasping fingers, thin and pale at first, then thicker, darker, acrid with the bite of burning pine. Caleb pressed the cloth of his sleeve to Abigail's face, dragging her deeper, into the cavern where the shadows thickened and the air turned damp. The roar of fire outside mingled with the baying of hounds and the cruel laughter of Silas Kane's men. They'll smoke us out like animals, Caleb muttered, his voice hoarse, each word tasting of ash. When the flames choke the air, they'll wait for us to crawl out. They'll want us broken. Abigail's eyes gleamed through the haze, unblinking, steady in a way that unnerved him. Not broken, she whispered. Reborn. That is what fire does. It consumes and it reveals. He wanted to curse her riddles, to snap that prophecy meant nothing when lungs filled with smoke. But the way she looked at him, as if she saw something hidden beneath his skin, stilled his tongue, deeper into the cave. With no choice, Caleb led her further, stumbling over jagged stone, his boots scraping the floor as the tunnel narrowed. Water dripped from above, hissing faintly as it met the creeping smoke. The cave pressed closer around them, the walls slick, echoing their every breath. Then, a break. The narrow path spilled into a hollow chamber, wide enough for them to stand upright. Faint shafts of moonlight cut through cracks in the stone above, silver beams striking a pile of rubble at the far end. Caleb stopped cold, his chest clenched at the sight. Among the rubble lay something unnatural, beams of weathered wood, fragments of iron. Not random collapse, but remnants of something once built. Abigail moved ahead, her fingers trailing the beams with reverence. "This place was prepared," she murmured. "Hidden, forgotten until you returned." Caleb swallowed hard, his hand trembling as it brushed the splintered wood. The markings carved into it froze his blood. An old brand. The Hardin brand, his father's mark. The revelation memories he had long buried clawed their way back through, the smoke in his head. His father's voice low and urgent the night before he left for war. "There's something here, Caleb. Something our family swore to keep. Don't let it fall into the wrong hands." Caleb staggered back, gripping his skull as the fragments sharpened. He had been too young to understand then, too consumed by the hunger for battle. Now the truth came flooding with the force of the river that had carved this cave. A cache, a secret kept in the earth hidden beneath the Hardin ranch. Abigail's hand touched his shoulder, anchoring him. "This is why Silas hunts you, not only for blood. He believes you know where it lies. Wealth, power, justice twisted into greed. He'll kill you for it, and he'll burn this land until it's his." The words slammed into Caleb like a bullet. Rage surged, not just at Silas, but at his father, at fate, at himself. All these years he had thought he was returning to ruins, to nothing. But no. The land still bore a secret worth dying for. The fire pushes in. The reprieve was brief. Smoke poured thicker now, clawing at their throats, rolling down the tunnel like a living beast. Abigail coughed violently, sinking to her knees. Caleb yanked her up, dragging her toward the faint moonlight slashing through the cracks above. He shoved at the rocks, coughing, eyes watering. The stones shifted, a small cascade tumbling free. Through the gap he glimpsed the night sky, cold, and vast stars burning indifferent to their struggle. Behind them the roar of fire grew louder. The riders were piling more brush, their laughter echoing like devils. Silas's voice cut through, cruel and patient. "You can't bury the past, Hardin. It'll smoke you out every time." Caleb slammed his shoulder against the stones until blood smeared them. At last the gap widened enough for Abigail to squeeze through. He lifted her, shoving her toward freedom, ignoring her protests. "Go," he barked, his voice breaking. Near death, but as she scrambled out, the smoke surged, choking him, dragging him down into darkness. His knees buckled, his revolver slipped from his hand, clattering on the stone. And in that black haze, visions came. Not the cave, not the fire, but fields of gold under a burning sun. His father's face, grave and weary. His mother's hands, gentle on his shoulder. And then, Silas Kane's eyes, not full of hatred but of desperation, a mirror of his own. The voices tangled. "Protect it, Caleb. Protect what is ours. You stole from me. It's mine by right. You were chosen. Even if you don't. Believe," he gasped, clawing against the smoke torn between collapse and fury. Then, Abigail's hands on him, pulling, dragging, her strength impossible for her size. The cool bite of night air rushed into his lungs, and he collapsed onto the earth beneath the stars. Silas's vow, but they were not free. Torches glowed in the distance, riders spreading across the ridge. Silas Kane's silhouette loomed above them, framed by firelight, his voice carrying like a sermon of doom. "You can run through the dark all you want, Hardin," he called, "but you'll never outrun the blood between us. You carry my brother's ghost, and I'll carve it out of you piece by piece, and when I do, that secret buried under your land will belong to me." His men cheered, their voices carrying into the night. Caleb lay gasping, smoke burning his chest, while Abigail knelt beside him, eyes fierce despite the soot on her face. "You see now," she whispered. "It isn't just vengeance, it's legacy. And if you don't face him, the land, the secret, the blood, all of it will be lost. Caleb clenched his fists, rage and revelation colliding in his chest. Silas wasn't just a man. He was the shadow of everything Caleb had tried to forget. And the reckoning would not wait much longer. The cliffhanger. The riders spread like wolves circling their prey, torches swaying, dogs howling at their scent. Silas raised his knife, its blade gleaming with promise. Abigail's whisper trembled with both terror and faith. The time is coming, Caleb. You cannot run anymore. You must choose. And as the torches closed in, Caleb rose to his feet. Smoke, still pouring from his lungs, revolver in his hand once more, his voice raw and defiant, split the night. Then let the reckoning come. The reckoning. The night was alive with fire. Torches burned along the ridge like a ring of judgment, their light flickering over the snarling hounds and the hard faces of Silas Kane's riders. Smoke clung to Caleb's clothes, the taste of it, raw in his throat, every breath a reminder of how close death had come. His revolver felt heavy in his hand, not just a weapon but the last thread of defiance, tying him to the world. Abigail stood at his side, her hair wild, her dress streaked with soot, clutching her Bible to her chest like a shield forged of faith. She said nothing, but her presence steadied him, as though her silence itself was a prayer. Caleb felt her gaze on him, fierce, unwavering, and for the first time since he'd ridden back into the valley, he no longer felt entirely alone. Silas Kane rode forward, tall in the saddle, his black coat rippling in the night wind. The firelight revealed every scar carved across his face, each one a story of violence, each one a reminder of the blood between them. His men hushed as he raised his hand, the valley falling into a silence so deep it felt like the land itself was listening. "You've run long enough, Hardin," Silas called, his voice carrying clear and steady. "But blood debts don't fade with distance. You killed my brother, and the earth itself remembers. Tonight I'll bury you beside him." Caleb lifted his revolver, aiming squarely at Silas's chest. "Your brother made his choice. War took him, same as it took half the men I knew. Blame me if you like, but don't pretend you're the only man who lost family." Silas's eyes narrowed, and his smile was a slow, venomous curl. "No, Hardin. I'm the man who still knows how to collect." The storm breaks. With a shout, Silas's men surged forward, rifles cracked, bullets tearing through the night. Caleb dropped low, firing back, each shot echoing like thunder against the canyon walls. One rider pitched from his saddle, another spun back, clutching his shoulder. The hounds lunged, teeth flashing, only to fall under Caleb's furious aim. Abigail clung to the earth, praying aloud now, her voice rising through the din. Every word seemed to strike against Caleb's ears like a bell, keeping him steady even as chaos raged around him. Silas dismounted with deliberate calm, striding forward with his knife gleaming in the torchlight. He didn't fire, didn't rush. He wanted this close, personal. His eyes never left Caleb's, as though this battle was theirs alone. The others nothing but shadows moving in a play written long ago. "Face me, Hardin," Silas growled, his voice low, hungry. "Let the others watch what justice looks like." Man against man, the world narrowed to the two of them. Caleb's revolver clicked empty, the last shell spent in a spray of sparks. He tossed it aside, drawing his father's old hunting knife from his belt. The steel caught the firelight as he stepped forward, meeting Silas in the circle of flame. They clashed like forces of nature, blades flashing, fists striking, boots grinding into the dirt. Silas was stronger, his fury lending him power, but Caleb was quicker, hardened by years of survival, every scar teaching him where to strike, where to endure. Steel met steel, sparks flying as knives locked, sweat and blood mingling in the dust. Silas's voice rasped through clenched teeth. "You think this ends with you?" "No, Hardin. Your family guarded a secret, something buried, something men will kill 100 times over for. I'll have it. And when I do, even God won't stand in my way." Caleb's strength wavered as the words cut deeper than the blade. The secret, the cache his father had hidden, the burden he had tried so hard to forget. Silas wasn't just avenging a brother. He was hunting for the very legacy of the Hardin land, Abigail's sacrifice. The fight shifted, Silas slamming Caleb against the stones, his knife pressing close. Caleb strained, but the edge inched toward, his throat Silas's weight crushing him. The world spun, stars blurring, blood pounding in his ears. Then, a cry. Abigail rushing forward, her Bible clutched like a weapon. She struck Silas across the head with the heavy book, the sound sharp as bone-meeting wood. Silas staggered, his knife cutting shallow across Caleb's shoulder instead of his throat. Rage exploded in Silas's eyes. He turned, shoving Abigail, hard to the ground, his blade rising above her. "Then I'll take her first," he roared. Something inside Caleb broke open. Pain, memory, fury. All of it surged at once, a fire greater than the flames around them. With a roar, he tackled Silas, their bodies crashing into the dirt. The final blow, they grappled in the dust, hands clawing for the knife. Silas's strength bore down, his teeth gritted, his breath hot with rage. But Caleb's fury was different now. Not only vengeance, not only survival. It was for Abigail, for the land, for the father who had trusted him, for the family name that would not be buried under Kane's hatred. With a final surge, Caleb wrenched the blade free and drove it into Silas's chest. The outlaw's eyes widened, shock flickering into something almost like peace before the light drained from them. He collapsed against Caleb, heavy as stone, his blood dark and warm in the dirt. Silence fell. The riders froze, their leader gone. One by one they turned their horses, retreating into the dark, their torches dwindling like dying stars. The hounds scattered, tails low, vanishing into the trees. Only the fire remained, crackling, consuming, as Caleb stood over Silas Kane's still form. The aftermath Abigail crawled to him, her hands shaking as they touched his bloodied shoulder. "It's over," she whispered, though her voice trembled with doubt. Caleb looked down at Silas's body, the knife still buried, the earth drinking the blood. "No," he muttered, his voice hollow. "It's only beginning." Abigail's eyes searched his, desperate for hope. "You have a choice now, to carry this burden alone or to share it. You don't have to be the man the war made you. You can be the man your father believed you were, the man I've prayed you would become." Her words struck him deeper than any blade. For the first time, he let the knife fall from his hand. He sank to his knees, the smoke and blood and weight of years pressing down on him, and yet with Abigail's arms around him, he felt something he thought he had lost forever. The faint stirrings of redemption. The closing image as dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in pale fire. Caleb and Abigail stood together on the Hardin land, the ashes of the barn still smoldering. The secret his father had hidden remained buried, its shadow stretching into the future. Silas Kane was gone, but his warning lingered. Men would come again. They always did. But for now, Caleb was not alone. Abigail's hand slipped into his, her voice soft but certain. "Whatever comes, we face it together." And in the silence of that ruined valley, Caleb Hardin, soldier, survivor, rancher returned, felt the weight of destiny settle on his shoulders. Heavy, yes, but not unbearable. Not anymore.